In the G7 in Britain are to sign a declaration to improve COVID-19 surveillance and speed up diagnostics and vaccine development. Now, the declaration is also aimed at preventing future pandemics by responding to outbreaks within 100 days. President Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's president, arrived in the United Kingdom to join the G7 summit. He'll attend proceedings from today, with South Africa invited as one of a handful of guest nations. SABC's Makin-Isherwood reports from Cornwall.
On the sands of Carbis Bay in southwest England, the leaders of the G7 meet, face to face for the first time in 2 years. But there was little time to enjoy the sea views when business needed to be done.
They want us to be sure that we're beating the pandemic together and discussing how we'll never have a repeat.
For emerging markets, it's going to help us all to get growth back on track, and getting growth back on track also means
500 million doses, the UK 100 million. But the government here believes that by the end of this summit, the G7 could agree to donate 1 billion vaccine doses between them. Even for countries with strong vaccination programmes, global recovery is vital. As an area reliant on tourism, Cornwall has lost an estimated 19 billion rand in revenue since the start of the pandemic. On Saturday, this group of leaders swells, with South Africa and other invited democracies joining discussions. Among the items on Saturday's agenda, preparing the world to head off future pandemics. Makin-Isherwood, SABC News, Cornwall.
All right, thank you very much to Laura. We will be going to her in about 45 minutes or so, so stand by for a live report from Cornwall. Let's get the very latest now and bring in SABC News Foreign Editor Sophie Mokoena. She joins us now via on the telephone. Sophie, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Look, lots on the agenda. We've got the climate change issue. We've got economic recovery, global economic recovery. On the COVID front, there is this call for a waiver on patents on vaccines. What's your read on matters as it currently stands? What's the state of play? Who's for it? Who's requiring more details in terms of G7 leaders?
Well, of course, you know that South Africa and India have been pushing for this position, and they did receive support from 60 countries around the world and the World Trade Organization negotiations. But now these G7 countries, there are two main countries that are really supporting waiver. You have the United States of America and France in particular, even though France is indicating that this should not be the only means to ensure that you deal with the issue of access to vaccine. Yeah. And therefore, President Ramaphosa, on behalf of the continent, supported by Prime Minister of India virtually, they are going to push for this position, and it remains to be seen whether there will be a movement from other leaders. We know Germany is against this move, and the European Union as well, but it remains to be seen whether they will make headway or there will be some compromises from these developing or the low-income countries in terms of this waiver. We know that the president this morning will join the leaders in a session the focus will be on building back stronger. In other words, building strong health systems around the world, not only in the respective countries that are members of the G7, but around the world. And therefore, we expect an announcement in terms of dollars or euros or pounds. How much are they prepared to contribute in assisting the world to build better, strong health systems all over the world?
One of the ways that they see, apparently, in order to build back better is by pledging these vaccine doses. I understand the United States pledged to donate 500 million doses. UK reportedly pledged to donate 100 million, all part of the G7 pledge to provide this 1 billion doses to the WHO's COVAX scheme. Sophie, is that enough? Is that sufficient? Because you probably need much more than 1 billion doses to satisfy the need on the continent, especially here in Africa.
When you look at the crisis of access to vaccines, you can see that this will not be enough, particularly because they are saying that within from now up to 2022, that is too far. You need vaccines in developing countries, the low-income countries, the poorer countries, as of yesterday. For example, the continent, on Wednesday, the World Health Organization Regional Office, Dr. Makin-Isherwood, indicated that only 9 countries on the continent are likely to achieve herd immunity in terms of vaccinating the population. But you can see from there that it is a very high mountain to climb, and therefore you need more. And 1 billion, yes, will be appreciated, but it will not go far enough. That is why activists are calling for a better number, 2 billion doses, so that you can cover quite a number of, a high number of people around the world, so that you have this herd immunity around the world, not only in these developed countries. I think President Joe Biden summed it very well on Thursday when he said that America is not safe until all countries are safe. And yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that as you build back better and stronger, you must ensure inclusivity. And they shouldn't repeat the mistake they committed during the economic crisis of 2008, where these 8 industrialized countries were inward looking and they focused on rebuilding their economies and didn't assist the developing countries and the poorer countries to revive their economies. And there's no way in this global village where you can be inward looking. G7 is not an island. They are part of the global village. That is why the Secretary General of the United Nations, during the Nelson Mandela lecture, he indicated that the world needs a new deal. And him arriving this morning, Antonio Guterres, his message in this session this morning, I think will be, yes, building back better, inclusivity must be at the center, and he is going to lobby for a new deal and, of course, push for more access to vaccines, away with vaccine, apartheid vaccine.
I guess one of the ways in order to improve inclusivity is to increase vaccine production on the continent of Africa. But then, you have to transfer the intellectual property rights to the continent. What's the pushback here?
Yes, there is a huge pushback, as it did happen during the HIV pandemic. Pharmaceutical companies are having none of that. They don't want to make those compromises. But at the WTO level, this week, there was progress. And with this summit, I think lobbying and support from the United Nations, we may see some headway. But the problem here, you have to deal with these pharmaceutical companies and scientists and different institutions around the world who developed these vaccines for COVID-19, who are saying that this will discourage research and also innovation because it is almost like doing the work and others just getting it free. But President Ramaphosa and the Prime Minister of India, they are very firm to say that let's do it in the same way we have done with the HIV and AIDS drugs. And therefore, it's not a very long-term agreement. It will be until such time we are able to control this pandemic, because we are facing a pandemic. It's not a small outbreak of a virus somewhere there, but it is a world crisis, and you have to build better in a very inclusive way. And we know that Africa has indicated that it stands ready in terms of infrastructure and facility, particularly South Africa with the BioVac institution in the Western Cape, and here in Johannesburg, the Aspen in Eastern Cape, in Gqeberha, and Kenya, Senegal, and Ghana are also saying that we stand ready. We can build capacity if we have support. Macron, when he was in the country, he indicated that the European Union is going to donate a chunk of money to ensure that the continent is able to build capacity for manufacturing of vaccines, drugs, and therapeutics for COVID-19, but also for future pandemics.
You know, Sophia, I've been listening to some criticism with regards to the meeting of the G7. Given the shift in economic balance of power in the world, how relevant is the G7 at this stage?
Well, the past 4 years, the G7 was standing on a very shaky ground. During President Donald Trump, the former president of the United States of America, there were tensions within the G7. America, the biggest economy in the world, it was not doing what it is supposed to do to unite the G7. I think the arrival of President Joe Biden has assisted the G7 to reinvent itself, but to set the agenda in terms of global matters. You saw the body language yesterday. You don't need sound bites and speeches. You look at the body language, and that's where your story is. Yeah. The way President Biden was embraced by everybody, the way he is accessible, the way he is, he engaged and with body language and talks when he is discussing something with a leader. That hand, President Macron, walking with President Joe Biden, it speaks to while there are burning issues inside the meeting behind closed doors, but at least they are willing to project this united force. The only technicality will be in terms of the implementation. Will they implement what they are going to promise the whole world? Yeah. It will be up to the global citizens, the citizens of the world, particularly the activists and the NGOs, to hold them accountable in terms of what they have promised, because the theme is building back better inclusivity. And therefore, everybody would want to see everybody being taken on board, not just the club of the G7.
Look, you raise a very important point in terms of body language. When you have limited access to these G7 leaders, optics become very important in order to read the situation. So you have countries, just before I let you go, you have countries like South Africa, Australia there as guests. But countries that represent a big chunk of global GDP are not there. China, for example. Is there criticism leveled at the G7 in this regard?
Well, not much is being said in terms of China not being there. But for me as an international editor, I would love to see how China is interacting with the G7, particularly at a time where there's some frosty relations between the two biggest economies, China and the United States of America. But one is hoping that during the G20 summit, we will see a different body language, because at the G20 summit, you have all these countries that you've touched on. And we expect the G20 to be more inclusive. And one is hoping that we are not going to see similar pictures that we saw during the last G20 summit, when President Donald Trump was still head of state in the United States of America, where he was just throwing tantrums and dividing the whole bloc. We are hoping that during the G20 summit, we will see similar pictures that we saw yesterday during the G7 summit. South Africa is the only African country that is officially part of the G20 member states. And therefore there we hold a better sway or a better influence, because we are full members of the G20. And therefore I think even in terms of the continental representativity, South Africa at the G20 summit, they will push for those development and building back better to also apply or to assist Africa to build better. And when you go to the non-aligned movement again with almost 120 countries, you expect again countries such as China, South Africa and others to push a agenda, the same agenda of building back better, so that ordinary citizens of the world or global citizens can benefit in all those multilateral organizations and institutions and meetings, so that you go back to multilateralism. Biden has indicated that he supports multilateralism. So at a multilateral level, you must ensure that you are inclusive and you build back better by being inclusive.
Various dynamics to this G7 summit. Sophie Mokoena, as always, instructive. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That was our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, there, giving us her perspective on things, the state of play at the G7, what's at stake, what's on the agenda, etc., etc. Live report coming up at 11 o'clock.